The Bride reimagines the story of Frankenstein's monster, and his reanimated bride is a Bonnie and Clyde 1930s-style outlaw tale of murder and romance.
So the film takes place in 1930s Chicago. At least that's where the film starts off. You have Jessie Buckley, who is the bride, and Mary Shelley. She's kind of they kind of do this weird thing where they make it seem like she's possessed by the spirit of Mary in this, and she kind of has that dueling personality, conflict throughout the film, where she's talking normally and then trying to talk in this bombastic type style of Mary. And you have Christian Bale here as Frankenstein's monster. And, Jessie Buckley's character, the bride here, is basically killed off in the first act of this film here, where, she's tied up with some mob dealings and some other things. She runs afoul of the wrong people, and she's murdered, and that leads to the introduction of Frank here. And Frank is, a lonely monster, wants companionship, and seeks out Dr. Euphronius, who's played by Annette Bening in this film, and tries to convince her to resurrect a companion for Frank, and that kind of leads them to digging up Jessie Buckley and bringing her back to life as the bride and becoming Frankenstein's bride. And you get up to a whole bunch of hijinks after that. What did you think about this movie after it kind of kicked off in the first act?
Yeah, we ended up seeing it about a week ago and not being able to talk about it till now, but I'm still kind of mixed about how I feel about this film, because it's definitely a more, I guess you want to say, artistic take on Frankenstein, because you are taking the monster and you're taking his bride into 1930, so you're dealing with a much different time period than the character originally is. And then you're doing that kind of throwback to the Bride of Frankenstein film where Mary Shelley is doing the prologue, but in this one she sticks around for the entire film. Like I said, it's a dual role for Jessie Buckley, which out of the gate I want to say Jessie Buckley was phenomenal as the bride in here. She was the biggest kind of highlight for me because she was having to be all over the place. Now, whether if that was a good thing or not with the Mary Shelley possession, because it used it to try to set the bride up as this kind of feminist powerhouse who would cause movements and other things to happen in Chicago around then, of empowering women to go around, which I don't necessarily I don't have a problem, with that type of stuff, but did it fully fit in a Frankenstein type of story? Because it does kind of happen. Once it happens fairly quickly, unless she just started this revolution of things. But it was really odd with the ticks of the Mary Shelley possessions, because it's trying to paint like Mary Shelley really wanted the bride to be her biggest creation and stuff, but she really didn't create the bride. Like, there was a character in the book, but it was never brought to life. So there was really no story in The Bride of Frankenstein. The Bride of Frankenstein actually is only alive for like 2 to 3 minutes and never speaks in that 1935 film. So it's really trying to take the bride in a completely new direction, making commentary on men and society and everything like that, which, again, I don't have a problem with. It just felt a little off with the Mary Shelley possession stuff, because, as you said, I believe her name was Ida before she died. Yeah. And Mary Shelley's possession of her is what's leaking all of the information about the mobsters and gangsters and everything that's kind of going on there. But how would Mary Shelley know? Because this is in the 1930s. Mary Shelley wouldn't be alive. If her spirit's still alive for hundreds of years, how is she knowing all this information about gangsters in the world? And that's what gets Ida in the most troubles, because whenever Mary Shelley's taking over her, she's spouting out stuff that's getting her attacked and that's getting things to happen. And I just felt it was uneven to me when they did that stuff.
Yeah, and the messaging of the film is one thing. It just doesn't work in a cohesive story in a film like this, and I don't necessarily know that it does. It does feel like kind of a mess and a little bit all over the place as far as just the fluidity of the story, the way the story flows. Like, you kind of get like them on the run from the law, a lot of this, and that's why you kind of called it in the intro like a Bonnie and Clyde type film, because they very much feel like they're outlaws from not only the police, but they're being chased by the mob as well. So it's kind of like the dual, like, they're just on the lam from everybody. And in some cases it does work, and in some cases it doesn't. It's a very inconsistent film for me as far as I feel about it, because there are some good performances. Like Jesse Buckley, like you said, is good playing that dual role. Christian Bale is fine as Frank, but he's kind of, I don't know. It feels like something's missing from that monster to really give it like the oomph. Like you can see where he can be very intimidating, but he's also very childish, very immature in some other ways. Like what made me laugh the most was his obsession with Ronnie Reed, the actor, and that was like his grounding. His grounding here, who's played by, of course, Maggie's brother Jake, who obviously is a very talented and well-known actor as well. But all the goofy things they have Jake doing in this, and the different roles and the different films that he's in, because they have him playing in several different films. Like he's supposed to be like one of the film stars, one of the big film stars of that era that Frank is super attached to, and it's kind of all over the map. I think it's such an inconsistent movie for me, because there's bits and pieces of it that I thought were really good, and then a few bits and pieces where I'm just like, I don't care what's happening here. You know what I mean? Like it kind of feels like, I don't know, it just feels like an incomplete, inconsistent film for me.
And tonally, it was kind of all over the place, because you would get some really over the top humor with stuff, because they do pay tribute to young Frank, Gene Wilder's,
they do,
Mel Brooks's young Frankenstein in there, which was kind of fun to see, but it also felt a little off, because then it went very dark and emotional after that. But you'd get some humor, and then you would you'd get brutal violence, and then you would get sexual items happening. It just felt tonally, it was a little all over the place with it. And I told you before we started recording this, the only thing, as we always do, we try not to talk about it before so we can have that conversation here. Yeah. I thought this movie was like 2.5 hours long, but it's under 2 hours. Yeah. Because the kind of middle section drags a good bit. Heavy. Because once they get on the run, it's basically them just driving around or going to a different movie theater to watch a different movie. And that's how the police are kind of tracking them, because, well, clearly something is wrong physically with these people, that people are noticing it, and they're able to go around and see, like, yeah, he was in this movie and that movie. But it did feel like it dragged so long, and it didn't feel like the bride herself felt inconsistent, because you do get Frank is kind of lying to her throughout the movie. She's trying to ask about her past. She's trying to ask about who she was and what she was, and he's making up stories, and because she doesn't have her memories. And he's just trying to make it out like, yeah, we were in love. This is how we proposed. And that Frankenstein's monster, or Frank as he got called a bit in here, was gaslighting her, was trying to tell her this so he would have the companion and bride that he wants. And it bounces around so much between her kind of leaning into that and agreeing with it, but then like becoming really angry and not wanting to have anything to do with him. And then you have some of the bigger, more explosive things that happen towards the end. And then she's back to wanting him or not wanting him. And I can get that there should be some of that back and forth, but it just felt a little, kind of just like we said with the whole movie, it felt inconsistent with the storytelling, with the tone, with just about everything. I think that's the biggest thing I can say about it, is just inconsistent.
Yeah, and that's where I'm hitting the film the hardest, because I think the visuals and everything were really well done. Mm-hmm. I think the cinematography was good in the film. I like the set pieces. I like the costume designs and all that stuff. I'm just like really hammering on the plot here. And the middle of the film, like the second act of the film, is very slow. It's very methodical, and it's just inconsistent in tone, like you said. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of got a little bored with it about midway through, and I'm just sitting here like, okay, they're going here, and now they're going here, and now they're going here. I'm like, it feels like they were filling time. Like this almost would have felt cleaner in like a 1 hour special. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, they could pretty much have trimmed 15, 20, 30 minutes out of this film.
Easily out of this film to make it a little bit more of a smoother movie, but that's not the case here, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it was not afraid to get brutally violent when it needed to, because there's some intense things. There's some things that would definitely trigger some people that have dealt with, domestic violence, that would have dealt with, sexual violence. There's quite a bit of that type of tone and that type of thing in the film, and it does it does a good enough job of highlighting those things as being important to the story, but I don't know, man. It feels like there was something really missing from this story, and I still can't quite put my finger on it.
And yeah, and kind of how the police handled things as well. Like we get it's the 1930s, things are going to be a little different than that, but how they clearly have them cornered, could have surrounded them and things, and then because the bride actually shoots someone, it's given some light spoilers here with stuff. At that point, you would think they would open fire and ended everything right there, but they didn't.
Right.
And those kind of the inconsistencies with stuff is just it just didn't feel almost believable. It was really over the top, and like I said, outside of the feminist stuff, like it was fine. And the revolution that you're trying to bring in, this is stuff that wasn't part of, the Bride of Frankenstein. This is really reimagining it, but it just felt like it was really one instance that she stood up, but she didn't really say or do that much that you would think a revolution would have sprung from kind of what she did there. Like, it just didn't feel like, was that a big enough moment that women all across the city would revolt against? Like, it didn't feel like it was a big enough event. If they could have given us a big enough event, but because, I mean, like I said, it does feel like a waste of Jessie Buckley because, she had a fantastic performance in Hamlet, and now she comes into this and gives another fantastic performance, even though it is a bit strange and odd. She's giving it her all because she's blending that Mary Shelley's taking over, so she's got these tics and she's got that different way that she's speaking, and then she goes right back into the bride. But at times it does feel like there almost was a third voice in there, and you don't really know what that third voice was because you have Ida's voice and you have Mary Shelley's voice. So was that other voice supposed to be kind of like the bride's voice? Like, it was just, it's trying to be just so artistic and a big message that it's trying to get across, but I think it kind of failed all the messages and all the things it was trying to do. Like, it's not a terrible film, but it does have a ton of issues with that inconsistent tone and inconsistent storytelling. Because even, like I said, even some of the humor there's early on when he's first meeting the doctor, and the doctor thinks that he's hitting on her and wanting to do stuff with her. Like, no, I want you to help me make a bride. And it's like, oh. And it's like, it was just such an awkward little thing, like, because he's supposed to have been around for like over 100 years now, that he's supposed to have been alive and going strong, but he's been lonely, and this whole thing happens because he's dying of loneliness because he can't find someone to love him, so he wants to create someone to love him. But yeah, it just gets really inconsistent with how things does, and kind of replacing Victor Frankenstein with someone else in there. Of how quickly she was able to do it too. And I get that she's a doctor that's been studying this type of stuff, but she was very quick in how she could
had it ready.
She could create it. And she had the room ready to do this kind of stuff, but she was hesitant on it because she had a locked room where she could do these experiments. And it's just like, that's very convenient.
Right. Yeah. You gotta sacrifice, convenience for what it is. But yeah, it struggles really hard to find a consistent flow throughout the story, and I think that's where it really suffers. It's one of those that unfortunately I think struggles to hit the mark of what it's trying to do. And you can see there's elements of a really good story in there. Like you said, there's probably half of the movie I would say is really solid, and the other half is a big mess. And unfortunately, they don't tie together very well. And I have struggles with finding enough positive things to kind of make up for the fact because when we review, we try to be fair, and we try to give a little bit of leniency and grace when it comes to some of these, and sometimes we get kind of poked at for being, I think, a little too forgiving of some things sometimes. But in this film, it's hard to find enough positives to lift up the negative things and the issues that we have with this movie. Like you said, you do kind of feel like Jessie Buckley's performance is a little bit wasted. I thought Christian Bale didn't give his best performance here. Yeah. He's kind of kind of a miss as far as Frank goes, in my opinion. Like,
I would put it almost along the lines of his Thor: Love and Thunder performance at that. Like, you got a good actor in an interesting role, but you didn't really give him the meat
Yeah.
that he needed to make those characters shine.
yeah, he kind of felt a lot like Lenny from Mice and Men a little
Yeah.
bit in some cases here, which it's Frankenstein. I get, like, he's, not the brightest bulb in the brightest bulb in the box or anything, but like still, it's a mess. It's a little bit of a messy film, and that's unfortunate because, like you said, there's some pieces there to tell something really cool. I see what they were trying to do. I just don't think it was executed as well as it could have been, and that's what I'm really struggling with to find positive about this movie is. You had some bones there. You had some good concepts and good ideas. It just doesn't tie as well in totality as a complete film, and that's really unfortunate because there's some real bright spots that get overshadowed by not the best plot. I would say.
Yeah, and kind of the ending too is a little bit of a letdown, just because you get something that happens that you don't think something's going to be able to be redone because of what happened to a character, but then you also again have police surrounding the area, and then one person speaks up and says, let's just step out for a little while out of a crime scene and let things happen, and they're all just standing outside smoking and just fine of leaving things alone, while clearly something is going on inside and they're just standing around like nothing's happening. Like, it just, I get that it's trying to harken back to those early 1900 Frankenstein films and all that, but you're bringing it to the 1930s, so you still got those 1930s styles of the movies, but there's just some modern inconsistencies that I wish they would have done better with the storytelling in it. Like, I get you're trying to do throwbacks, that you're trying to make it feel like a period piece and that like if it was made in the 1930s and everything like that, but it was on the cusp, and this is sadly what we've ran into with a lot of films lately in the last year or so, is that they're right on the cusp of having something potentially really special and fun and interesting, but they just don't nail the story as it should be or it could be done. And it's just that inconsistency with the story that really just hampered this from being potentially a future classic that you could go back and watch with it, because it's not quite horror. It's not quite, I mean, it's more, like I said, that gangster mob love story, less than like a horror take on it. But it's also got so many different musical elements, and it just didn't gel together.
Yeah, there's so many things that you feel like could have been tweaked here or there, and you kind of see it in the response to the film too. Like, we're not one to really put a lot of stock in like Rotten Tomatoes scores or Metacritic scores or anything like that. We're kind of anti that too, but we like to have our opinions as well. But this is one that's definitely, a lot of people seem to have a similar take that we do as far as how they felt about this film, and I think that speaks widely to why this film is not having the success that I think they were hoping for it to have, because it did have some cool like trailers and stuff. The trailers for it were super cool. We've been seeing that trailer virtually in front of almost every film we've watched in the last 4 to 5 months at least. And you were hopeful with it based on that, but it just, the final film that we got just did not live up to the expectations that we had for it. And it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, so The Bride in the end was a bit of a disappointment. Like, Jessie Buckley gives a great performance, and she really shows off the range and what she can do, but the inconsistency of the bride character in general causes some issues with the film. And you also have, the character starting a feminist revolution, but you never really felt that the moment that sprung that was actually worthy of like being that big of a movement stuff. Christian Bale just felt a little flat, even though he's a fantastic actor. He just didn't have kind of that meat and the bones that he really needed to make Frankenstein's monster into something bigger. And yeah, overall, like, it had a good cast. It was well shot. It was right on the cusp of having something interesting, but inconsistent tone, inconsistent storytelling. It just fell a bit flat, and I'm probably going to put this around a 6.5, because it had some good moments. It had some good acting and good actors in it, but it was just so inconsistent.
Yeah, it's interesting you landed at a 6.5. I'm giving it a 5.5. I really am because it does. And I'm giving it a 5.5 mostly for Jessie Buckley's performance out of this. There's so much more negative stuff weighing this movie down for me. You touched on a lot of those things. It's just inconsistent. If you have a movie that drags, and I put my enjoyment of the film as a factor into my ratings, and I got bored in the movie a little bit where like that's not a good thing. Like if you're not keeping my attention throughout the entire film, and I honestly got a little bored about midway through, and it's just like, all right, can we get to where like stuff picks up again? And I'm usually along the ride for character development and things like that we really didn't feel like we got that much of in this film, and it really drags it down for me. Like if I'm bored watching a movie, it's not going to score well with me, and for that I'm giving it a 5.5. And it's unfortunate because I was really excited to see this film, and I think I was very disappointed with how I struggled to really care about the characters and what was happening to them in the film, and that was unfortunately a big miss of this movie for me because it just wasn't compelling enough throughout the entire story for me, and that's unfortunate because, like I said, I feel like it's a 50% good movie, 50% messy movie. And for that, it really drags the score down for me to, I'm giving it a little bit of a bump above, 5 out of 10 because of Jessie Buckley's performance is enough to really lift it up past what would be a really bad score for me. And that's unfortunate. And unfortunately, that's where we're at.
Yeah, a lot of mine was because Jessie, like, even though I felt the character was so all over the place and inconsistent, I can appreciate just how committed and good Jessie Buckley was as a character because she was able to, play the dual roles and make them feel like two completely different people, but also have that weird mashup of Mary Shelley channeling her and being able to go back to Ida and the bride and everything else like that. Like she really was the highlight of this film with her acting. As you had Penelope Cruz in there, which we didn't really talk about. That those two, the detective characters were just. It almost felt like filler. Like they really didn't do much with this story at all. They had bits and pieces to the story, but they really didn't do much.
Yeah, I mean, she basically kind of spoil her role in the film. She's a female detective who's not actually a female detective because due to the time she couldn't be a female detective.
Just not respected to
be
one.
Yeah, totally disrespected. It felt like an unnecessary side quest in the movie, like in my opinion, and they spent a little too much time on that as well, and it kind of drug that down for me too. I'm like, she's clearly a talented detective and knows what she's doing and has a little bit of a bigger role in the film than we're really talking about here, but like it just felt unnecessary, like an unnecessary side quest we go on with them too, and it's just like, okay, why is this a part of the film and why should I care about it? They didn't make me care enough about her as a character. Not saying that her performance is bad or anything, because she's a fantastic actress as well, and she did fine with what she was given, but it just, I don't know, it just felt kind of unnecessary to kind of go on that side quest as well. And that's part of that middle part of the film that just kind of drug it down for me too, and we're just like, why? Like, this is not who we care about in this movie. Like, it just, I don't know, it definitely drug it down for me.
Yeah, and that's like you said, when you have a film that is only around an hour and 45 minutes or so, and you have a middle that drags seemingly that felt like 30 minutes. Like I said, after watching the movie, I felt it was a 2.5 hour movie, and it wasn't.
It very much was not.
It was well under 2 hours. So when you have a movie under 2 hours that has a middle section that drags as much as this one felt that it dragged, it may not have been that lengthy amount of time, but it made the audience feel it was. That's a major problem because you don't have a very long film, so you're wasting a lot of potential character building and story building that you just had for some really light conversations that in the end just wasn't that interesting or fun or anything else to have. So yeah, that really drug it down a bit. Again, it's just it had big potential with everything it was doing. It just felt like it never capitalized on the actors it had and never capitalized on really hammering home that story in an interesting way that we actually kind of cared about what was going on.
And I would be remiss if naturally, because they're so close in release together, try not to compare it to Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which go back in our archives and check out our episode.
Which is about 3 hours long.
And it was a longer film, but it flowed so much better, and it was such a more cohesive story. And They really told a much better story. Jacob Elordi's performance as Frankenstein was so much better than Christian Bale's. It's not even funny. Like it's not fair to compare them because they're two different stylistic and tonally different films, but because it's similar subject matter and they were released so close together, you have to kind of, your brain can't help but kind of compare them if you've seen both films. And I got to say, Guillermo del Toro's movie was significantly better than this one. Like, this is very unfortunate, clear step down. And that's unfortunate, like you said, because there were so many talented actors involved with this film that you just unfortunately missed the mark and missed it in a big way. And I think our scores reflect that.
And then I think Maggie showed that she has a good eye and stuff for directing for the scenes and everything else. It was just the story. The story just didn't feel like it was it was finished, that it was complete, that it felt like it was trying to be almost more artistic in its messaging and everything other than actually letting that message shine properly through its actors and its story and stuff. Because like I said, I had no issue with the adding in the feminist stuff because Mary Shelley was considered a feminist icon and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it was just the way it was handled because the bride felt so wishy-washy in her own feelings of feminism and that. But also, again, like I said, the one scene that's supposed to set up that revolution, it was a good scene.
Just didn't have the impact.
But it just wasn't like a gut punch impact. Let's rise up and take down every guy and everything that has oppressed us. And it didn't have that. It could have, if it had that pact, it might have improved the movie by at least a pointer. So with it just didn't have that. It just kind of felt flat. It didn't feel like the start of a revolution. It felt flat. Yeah,
and I want to see Maggie Gyllenhaal take another crack at directing another film and telling another story. Because like you said, she does have a good eye for cinematography. The direction of the film was okay. It's the meat of the story is what we have so much of an issue with, and that's why it really drags down the quality of the film. But yeah, I want to see her take another crack at it. I'd be willing to go check out the next film that she does, and hopefully she gets another chance to tell another story, and we'll see how that one does. But unfortunately, this one wasn't it.
So The Bride is in theaters now. Not sure how much longer you'll see it because it has underperformed box office-wise as well, that not everyone, probably because of those low scores that come out, as we try to say, like, when, especially being reviewers and stuff too, help it form an opinion. You can take or leave what all of us say. Yeah. But there are quite a few that, if Rotten Tomatoes is under a certain percent, I am just not going to theaters to see it. If this person doesn't like it, I'm not going to go see it. Like they do, there are several people who really, or several groups of people that really put all of their weight behind something and to those scores on Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes, and they live and die by that. Because sometimes there's been lower rated movies that have turned out to be actually really good, and we're not sure where those other critics were with that film, but it underperforms because that Rotten Tomato score was, lower, and there's a group that's just like, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there's a lot of messy stuff behind the scenes with all of those scores and, toxic fandoms and stuff, just review bombing stuff and them letting it happen and affecting their aggregate scores and all that stuff. And it's a hot mess. We're always big advocates of, if you want to see a movie, go see it. We very adamantly do not read reviews before we go and see a film. We'll look at them afterwards. Like I'm big on checking out and seeing what the pulse of other people are feeling about it after I've seen the movie. I don't listen to any of that noise before we go and see it. And if you're somebody who's watching us, even like us, do this, first of all, thank you, obviously. But don't let us deter you from seeing a movie just because we don't like it necessarily either, because that our viewpoints on films could be different from yours, and you could see something we don't. That's why we always ask people to come and talk to us about these films and let us know what you think and share your opinions. Obviously, come to our Discord and talk about it with us there, comment on our YouTube page and do all those things, but don't put all your stock into other people's opinions on a film. Go see it and form your own. And you'll find a lot of times you probably will disagree with people that you're reading and listening to and paying attention to. Like, don't let that ruin a chance to enjoy a film that you may find a lot of appreciation for. And I'll stand on my soapbox on that till the end of time for sure.
Yeah, because you get some good points out of different reviews and stuff, but in the end, if you had interest in it, go check it out on a cheaper day. Or
we did.
if you're not going to see it in theaters, check it out when it hits streaming somewhere, because, you know, a lot of films are not taking that long till it gets to streaming platforms and stuff. But it's not every film's going to be for everybody. And I was really interested in this one heading into it. I thought it was going to be fun and interesting. You had Jesse Buckley, you had Christian Bale, you had a pretty stellar cast. It just didn't fully work in the end. And I was probably a little bit more generous with my 6.5 than I probably should have been, just because I didn't despise the film. I was just disappointed that it just didn't capitalize on what it could have really been in the end.
Yeah, and it left us wanting way more than what we wanted to want out of a film, and that's unfortunately why it gets a negative review from us. And you know, these things happen, and you know, hopefully with the next things we get to review, we'll have better scores and much more positive things to say. We liking movies. Like, we don't go into these movies like, God, I hope this movie is terrible, because it sucks. We love the medium of movies, and we love when they're great, and we love, you know, when it can let us forget about everything else that's going on that's crazy in the world right now, and just we want all of these films to be really good. We'd love to sit here and talk glowingly about every film we see, but we're going to be honest when we find something we don't like, and this one was one that, you know, we had high hopes for, but it just didn't live up to the expectations we had for it. And unfortunately, our grades have to reflect that. But, you know, as everything else in life does, time moves on, and we're going to go on to other films that we can't wait to have glowing things to say about. So I'm excited for that.
You also know how hard it is to get things made in Hollywood, especially in modern day, about getting your budget and getting the cast, but also just how many hundreds of people, up to some films, thousands of people it takes to get these made and put out. Like, we know it's not fully easy to get a film done and right, because even final cuts of films can be determined by the studios, and the directors may not have been able to put out the film that they wanted to put out because of studio involvement, or just many other issues that happen. So, like, we never go in ever wanting to dog on or hate a film or anything else. We just go into as two guys that just want to generally give our honest take of how a film related to us, how it felt to us. Like, maybe we weren't the main audience for this because of the stories and of that it was trying to tell with the feminist movement and everything else. Maybe it just wasn't something for us, and that, you know, other people and women are going to get more out of this than two guys would. It's every film can be taken and looked at so differently depending on who you are and your life story and everything else. Like, because there are definitely some popular films or Oscar award-winning films that I haven't enjoyed.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful thing about this medium. It has something for everyone, and we like when stories that represent multiple viewpoints, different backgrounds, different life experiences from people. We love when those stories get told and when they get made. Do they always work? We'll try to always be fair about critiquing all of them, no matter who makes them or what the subject matter is about. But that's the beautiful thing about this medium. There's so many different ways you can tell stories, and some of them work and some of them don't. And that's the fun part about taking the risk and you know, giving your time to seeing these things, and we'll never not enjoy doing it for sure.
Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in. If you feel so inclined, do all the things to help the show out, from follows, shares, likes, and comments on social media to subscribing on YouTube and your favorite audio platforms. All of it helps us out so much, and we can't thank you enough for the support.
And you can also become a subscriber over at our Patreon, where you get each and every episode delivered to you early. You can get exclusive merch items and even have your name read out at the end of every episode. Go check us out at patreon.com/we'll bring the popcorn.
And that's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you on the next one.